I have always considered myself a good husband and father, working for the good of my family. However, my wife's betrayal forced me to rethink my views on the world. At that moment, I could not determine which actions would be the right thing to do and which would only make things worse. It wasn't easy, but I found the strength to recognize that my marriage was broken and I needed to act. My name is Kevin. I was preparing to attend an event celebrating the 10th anniversary of the company where my wife worked. I was expecting a pleasant evening with Connie's friends and coworkers. However, the day before the event, she unexpectedly announced that she would not be going because her father was seriously ill and she needed to leave for another city immediately. She avoided my gaze while saying this. I offered to go together, figuring it would be hard for her to manage alone, but Connie insisted that it would be too difficult for me and convinced me to stay home. Her determination seemed strange to me, and I felt uncomfortable with this turn of events. But I decided to honor her wishes. On the day of the party, as Connie was leaving, I asked her to call me when she arrived. She said, "Of course I love you," but her words sounded mechanical. As soon as the door closed behind her, I was sure she had gone to the party to meet a coworker named Matthew Garcia. Over the past few months, I had noticed changes in her behavior and hints of a connection between the two. I hired a private investigator who followed my wife for several weeks and sent me regular reports of his observations every 3 days. I invested heavily in the private investigator's services. In addition to the standard photographs of my wife having lunch with her coworker, I was provided with videotapes. They showed my wife spending time in the company of Matthew Garcia. I'm a simple man. After college, I started a career as a cook and eventually became a chef. Connie and I went to the same high school and I already liked her then, but nothing worked out between us then. Later, when we met again at the age of 20, passion erupted between us. We dated for a long time, and despite my fear of proposing, I still dared after 6 years. This caused tension with Connie's father, who believed I was delaying marriage. Despite this, we married and raised a son, Joe, who is now in high school. Throughout our marriage, I never felt any reason to distrust Connie. She never gave any cause for concern. However, one day there was an incident that made me wonder. I usually picked Connie up from work and drove her home. However, one Thursday when I needed to take her, my car broke down. Then Connie had to take a cab to work. She worked as an accountant for a large construction firm, where the work was not dusty and the salary and bonuses allowed us to save up for our dream home. In recent years, whenever I had a day off, I continued to drive her to and from work to save money on expensive cab rides. But the day the car broke down, Connie came home a little later than usual. I was in the garage and saw the lights of an approaching car. I immediately went outside, assuming that Connie was coming home in a cab. However, she arrived in the company of a young man and introduced him as her coworker, Matthew Garcia. He appeared to be about 25 years old. Connie got out of the car and thanked him. I walked over to Matthew, shook his hand as a sign of respect, and asked if we owed him for the ride. He smiled and replied that it was no problem at all, then drove off in his old Nissen. I didn't think much of it at the time, but a few days later, while at work, Connie suddenly told me that Matt had given her a ride home again, saving her money on a cab. I didn't like that. It had been an emergency the first time, but now I saw no reason for Matt to keep driving her. I didn't say anything, thinking it wouldn't happen again. But within a week, Matt drove my wife home 3 times, and that was the last straw for me. One morning, I saw a Nissen parked outside our house. Unable to contain myself, I asked Connie why her coworker's car was parked under our windows. She replied that he had offered to pick her up for work in the morning and she couldn't refuse. I insisted that she come out and tell him that from now on her husband would drive her and that I didn't want to see his car outside our house. Connie didn't hesitate and grabbed her cell phone, about to nuzzle someone. I asked if she had his number. She put the phone down and said with a guilty look that it wouldn't happen again. I watched from the window as she came out and said something to Matt, after which he left. Over the next few weeks, whenever possible, I picked Connie up from work. When I couldn't, she would take a cab home. However, after I forbade her to ride with Matt, she became more withdrawn and taciturn. I hired a private investigator who, after only 4 days, provided me with my first clues. My worst fears began to be confirmed. The detective worked without a day off, and with each new piece of evidence, I realized that a direct confrontation with my wife was pointless. I decided to wait until the company's 10th anniversary party so the detective could follow Connie there. That night our son stayed with friends and I stayed home alone. I spent an hour preparing to talk to my wife, then settled down on the couch, turned on a movie, and relaxed with a glass of wine. Connie left for a party at 7 in the evening. At about 1:00 a.m., the detective called me, informing me that my wife had left the event with a coworker and headed to the hotel. He also clarified that all of Connie's coworkers assumed she was dating Matthew Garcia and even introduced me as her brother. I was shocked at the audacity and extent of her lies. The detective sent me electronic files, including photos, videos, and audio recordings, confirming that my wife had entered the hotel with her lover. I realized it was time to take action. I called it a plan. I called a very good acquaintance of mine and told him to get started in 10 minutes. I sat back and waited for the call. My friend, an excellent programmer, was to call Connie from a fake police number to inform her of the tragic robbery of our home that had killed her husband and that she needed to return home immediately to testify. I expected Connie's reaction when she received such news at an unexpected moment. Shortly thereafter, I received a phone call from an acquaintance of mine, Kevin. He reported that Connie believed the news and he could hardly contain his laughter. I thanked him for his help. After this conversation, the detective contacted me and told me that Connie had left the hotel with her companion, who was buttoning his blouse in a hurry. They got into the car and headed for my house. Her lover's presence was not part of my plan, and I hoped he wouldn't decide to interfere. I didn't want to get in trouble with the police if he had to go to the emergency room. I sat by the window and waited for them to arrive. They pulled right up to the house. Connie got out first and looked around, apparently expecting to see an ambulance and the police, but the place was empty. She stood there, not knowing what to do. Her companion apparently realized it was a trap and started urging her to get back in the car. I decided to take control of the situation. I went outside and yelled, "Honey, I've been waiting for you." "Matt, thank you for bringing my wife. You can leave now," I shouted from the porch, and Connie, head down, walked toward me, feeling guilty. The car started quickly and Matt disappeared. Coward, I thought to myself, look at the kind of guy you picked. The first chance he got, he dumped you and ran away. I said this to Connie, holding the door open for her to come in. "Why aren't you saying anything? Upset by the truth?" I continued, assuming he was being weak. "We're going to start looking for a new boyfriend for you." "Stop it, it's not what you think," she said, and I felt a hint of the lie I expected to hear. I helped Connie take off her outerwear and invited her into the kitchen. I opened the second bottle of wine and poured myself a glass. Connie held out her glass as well. "Haven't you had much to drink today?" I asked sarcastically, taking a few sips. Then started the conversation. "You rushed here with incredible speed. Explain to me why." "Because I love you and I was afraid something had actually happened to you," she replied. "A valid point," I said. "Now tell me why a man would lie to someone he loves." "Only if the lie is for good," she replied, her hands trembling. "Lying for the good is a stretch. Where have you been all evening?" I asked bluntly. "At an event," she replied. "You're saying it was for my benefit while I was at home all evening, restless and anxious, and you were spending time with your idiot," I began, my voice rising. She started to make excuses, but I interrupted her. "That's how you like it," I said. "Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me," she said. "Maybe we should send you to a psychiatrist then, so he can declare you crazy and exonerate you of your fraud," I said, throwing a big thick folder full of evidence on the table. "You thought you could con me into having sex with another man and make a deer out of me." I couldn't help myself. Connie looked at the large stack of photos. Tears were streaming down her face. I started to feel tears coming too, but I held back. I realized I needed to stop pressuring her to tell me everything. "You knew about everything this whole time?" she asked. "Absolutely about everything. And lying to me is pointless," I said. "How awful, I'm so ashamed," she said, crying. I calmed down a bit and started talking. "You know, I liked you since high school. You were the prettiest girl. I wanted to date you and gave you attention all the time. Remember, right? You even gave me an Origami Swan and told me that swans only have one love for life. If one partner dies, the other dies too because they can't live without each other." Pausing before continuing, I reminded her that I still have the Origami Swan. "No one has ever given me a gift like that," I pointed out, getting up to pour another glass of wine for both of us. Connie remembered the chocolates appearing mystically in my backpack. And you thought it was David? I asked. Yeah, I really thought it was him. He annoyed me so much, she replied. Do you remember prom? Continued I. I wanted to ask you to dance, but at the worst possible moment, I was so nervous my stomach turned over. And you spent the whole evening with me, taking care of me, I reminded you. Of course I remember. It's hard to forget, Connie said. After a moment, she continued, to be honest, I didn't take your attention seriously. At the time, I thought you were like all guys, you only wanted one thing, but now, I realized that you were really sincere. Yeah, I liked you a lot, and when we graduated, I thought we'd never see each other again. But fate brought us together again, I said. Yes, I believe fate just gave us time to grow up and start dating, she replied. It was an amazing time. We spent so much time together traveling, walking, having romantic candlelight evenings, I said. I loved it too, but the coolest thing that happened at that time in our lives was when you proposed to me, she said. Of course I remember. I was so nervous I almost ruined my pants, I replied. We went on a hike to climb a mountain because you wanted to conquer my fear of heights. As we were going up, I looked down and I was so scared I froze, she said. And that's when I said those magic words to you. I never expected you to do that. I just realized I couldn't live without you and I needed you. You never lied to me. I love that you always told the truth, and if something was bothering you, you talked to me about it right away, I said. Connie cried and could barely hold back her tears. It's just too bad we'll never get over your fear of heights. Oh my God, I love you so much, she said as she grabbed her wine glass and drained it in seconds. I love you too, Connie, I replied. A long pause followed my words as we sat in silence looking at each other. I saw the sincerity and remorse in Connie's eyes, so I moved on to the second stage of our conversation. You know, I began. I've been sitting and thinking about these past few months, wondering when and why I lost you. We had big plans, sending our son to a good college, buying a new house, getting a dog, changing our car, going to Switzerland. Why did it all go wrong? Saying these words, I looked straight into Connie's eyes. She understood what I meant. Kevin, I want that too, just like you do, she said. I don't know what's gotten into me. I'm confused. I love you and I can't understand how I could cheat on you for a moment of pleasure, she continued. I feel like you understand everything. You wouldn't have deliberately kept everything from me. You would have given me some minimal signs that you needed help. After all, you could have just talked to me. But instead, you chose the path of deceit and petty intrigue, I said. You deliberately told me you were staying late at work while you were actually going to hotels with a coworker. You lied to me about Matt no longer driving you home from work. And worst of all, you made our son lie to his own father. He told me you were taking a cab home even though he knew you weren't. I continued, catching my breath. For the past few months, I've lived among people who fed me lies on a daily basis. And these were my closest people, the ones I've always trusted and supported when needed. I just can't figure out if I've been a bad husband to you, a bad father to our son, I finished. Connie wanted to hug me, but I made it clear that this wasn't the time for caresses. I'm sorry, I'm a fool. I couldn't control myself. It just happened on its own. I knew it was wrong, and every night before I went to bed, I berated myself for it. But each new day I went deeper, and I thought it was too late to tell you anything. Even though I was suffering internally, she admitted. You suffered so much that you decided to bury your father, claiming he was sick. You say you felt bad every day. However, I have a video of you having sex and seemingly enjoying yourself. Why do you remain silent and passive when we have sex? Clearly, I can't satisfy you and now you are deceiving yourself, not me. I can see that clearly, she admitted. I did enjoy having sex with Matt, as frustrating as it was. He's younger and more energetic. But honestly, that's all I liked about him. I didn't have the feelings for him that I have for you. I'm not afraid to hurt him to say no or send him away. It's the opposite with you. I feel that I love you and I am constantly hurt by the fact that I can't keep my marital vows. Because of our routine, I've lost my sense of proportion and allowed myself to do something I can never forgive myself for. I'm sorry, Kevin. I love you. You're a very important person in my life, she said. I don't believe you, I said firmly. And you know why. A person who genuinely loves and values their partner will always admit their mistakes and try to make amends for their misdeeds. But you, on the other hand, deliberately deceived me. You didn't even think about the consequences or consider confessing to me. I understand that people can make mistakes when they're drunk, stupid, or in a moment of excitement. But when it happens on a regular basis, talking about any feelings becomes pointless. You were attracted to this guy, and that's a fact. You may not have loved him, but you had feelings for him. You chose him over me. You had a few months to realize your mistake, but instead you dug yourself a deeper and deeper hole, I said with conviction. But Kevin, I do love you. I would do anything for you to forgive me. I can quit my job, stay home, not talk to men about things you don't want me to, she said. I promise you I'll make it up to you, she replied sadly. I don't know how anyone can forgive that, I said. Go to a counselor. Let yourself find a way to forgive me, she said. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? I asked. I would give a second chance if I really loved the person, she replied. In a way, she was right, but not in our case. She wanted me to forgive her or she would draw her own conclusions. But I decided to respond in kind. I'll never be in that situation because I'm not a fool and I value my family, I replied coldly. Connie was taken aback, struggling to find the words. But it looked ridiculous. And what conclusion can we draw from this situation? You cheated on me. We are husband and wife, and we need to decide what to do next. I realized that you love Matt because I can no longer remember the last time you smiled at me. If you look at the pictures, you look happy in every one of them, which tells me you're happy with him. But Connie didn't let me finish and interrupted. Whoa, 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 I promise it won't happen again. I will cut all ties with Matt. I interrupted her. First of all, you were going to break up with him anyway because he's married and has 3 kids. Second, we're getting a divorce, I said and put the divorce papers on the table. Connie started to object, but I interrupted her again. You better sign them right now or I'll sue you and provide all the evidence of your cheating and the tape of our conversation today where you openly admit to everything. Better for you because no matter what, I still love you and I don't want you to face any problems. But, Kevin, I thought things could be fixed, she said. When I put the ring on your finger, I too thought I was marrying an honest and faithful woman. But alas, I was wrong. So I ended the conversation and went to gather my things while she signed the papers. I went into my room, locked the door and sat on the bed, starting to cry. It was hard to accept that the marriage I had put so much effort into had crumbled in an instant. I still loved Connie, but I realized there was no future for us because I couldn't forgive her. That made everything even more painful. I sat in the room for about half an hour. Connie knocked on the door several times, but I didn't open it. When I calmed down, I washed up in the bathroom first, then walked over to Connie, who handed me the signed papers. She was in tears too. I hugged her and thanked her for the happy years of my life. She didn't want to let me go, and that made saying goodbye even more painful. I called a cab and went to the hotel. At work, I drank almost every day as I was having a hard time getting over the breakup. My son tried to contact me and meet me a couple times, but I wasn't in the mood. 2 weeks later, the court gave us 90 days to reconcile and sessions with a psychologist, which I skipped. I knew it was a chance to get back to normal, but I also realized that everything would be built on lies and we wouldn't be able to get our old relationship back. Eventually, Connie and I divorced. I left the house to her and moved into a small apartment to live alone. I continued to work and visit my son, seeing Connie every week. After more than 6 months, Connie completely severed her relationship with Matthew Garcia and confessed to his wife about her affair with her husband, providing evidence found by my detective. I was happy to learn that the cheating husband had been punished, his wife had divorced him, and now Matthew was in a difficult situation. I continue to visit my son and miss Connie very much. I can't make new relationships as all women seem foreign and uninteresting to me. Connie hasn't made a new relationship either. She quit her job and found something more relaxing. We call often just to talk about how our day went. I feel like I still love her, but I'm afraid she will hurt me again. This is the end of the story. Please write your opinion about this story in the comments. We will be interested to know your point of view. Also, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to our channel. This will allow you not to miss new interesting and exciting stories. We wish you good luck.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.